that I'm not part of the club. And a lot of you listening to me right here, right now, you're not part of the club either.
They didn't want you to hear this. For years, Ice Cube was silenced by Oprah Winfrey's media empire.
What platforms have banned you?
I tried to go on The View. They didn't have me on The View.
Why?
Well, a few of the guests just really didn't like where I was coming from.
Until today, the camera tightens on Ice Cube's unflinching gaze as he drops the bombshell. I've been excluded on Oprah. The studio falls, silent.
I would think you'd be the person Oprah would want to promote. I mean, you grew up in South Central, you were successful at a young age, you have dignity, you say what you think. Like, I thought that was the goal.
Me too,
This isn't just any accusation. It's a direct challenge to television's most trusted voice. I had a movie called Barbershop, Cube continues, his calm delivery making the revelation more damning. I wasn't invited to participate with the cast. The pattern emerges.
Their brand of politics, I guess.
But if you can't think for yourself, then you're not really free, are you?
No, you're not. You're not. But I've been excluded on Oprah,
On Oprah?
I produced a show called Black White, very controversial. They had the whole cast on, but I wasn't invited. The interviewer can't hide his shock. I would think you'd be the person Oprah would want to promote. You grew up in South Central, successful at a young age. You say what you think. The unspoken question electrifies the moment. Why would America's beloved talk show queen systematically blacklist one of hip-hop's most successful entrepreneurs? What invisible rules had Ice Cube broken? As Cube speaks, the comfortable myth of Hollywood meritocracy crumbles before our eyes. If a cultural icon worth millions can be silenced, what chance do ordinary voices have? And what other truths has Oprah's empire kept from reaching your ears? I'm not part of the club, Ice Cube declares, leaning forward with the intensity of a man ready to burn bridges. And most of you listening right now, you're not part of it either. The club, those two words hang in the air, naming the invisible force that has shaped American culture for decades. A system where certain voices are amplified while others, regardless of their talent or success, remain muted. What makes them so mad, Cube reveals, lowering his voice as if sharing forbidden knowledge, is when you don't want to be part of their club. His words strip away Hollywood's glamorous facade, exposing the raw machinery of power beneath. The streets of South Central forged Ice Cube's resolve. The boardrooms of Hollywood tested it. Now, as he names the unnamed gatekeepers, he's declaring war on a system designed to control which stories reach your ears, which voices shape your world. You know who they are, he says with knowing confidence. The unspoken truth between him and millions of viewers. In a world that preaches diversity and inclusion, an invisible hand still controls the levers of cultural power. What am I going to do about these gatekeepers? Ice Cube's question hangs in the air. The challenge of a man who's spent decades fighting a system designed to silence voices like his. His answer arrives like a declaration of war. I'm going on The Gatekeepers podcast tour. I'm going to talk to everybody. The revolution won't be televised because television is controlled by the very gatekeepers Cube intends to expose. Instead, he's bypassing the entire ecosystem, taking his message directly to the people through platforms the establishment can't silence. Some people may get pissed off because I'm going to talk to everybody, he admits, unblinking and unapologetic. I'm not playing. This isn't just about Ice Cube's career anymore. It's about cracking open the doors that have remained closed to countless voices. It's about exposing the machinery that decides which stories you hear and which remain buried. It's going to be a crazy summer, he promises with the slight smile of a man who knows exactly how his actions will shake the foundations of power. It's going to be fun. Fun for the audience, terrifying for the gatekeepers who've operated unchallenged for decades. I would just like to say about this whole thing. I heard I was trending yesterday because people are saying that I was not supporting Taraji. Oprah's carefully measured words betrayed the cracks forming in her carefully constructed image. For decades, she positioned herself as the champion of Black artists and storytellers. Now, those same artists were publicly questioning her commitment. Behind the scenes of The Color Purple, a storm was brewing. Taraji P. Henson spoke out about inadequate pay for Black actors, a revelation that struck at the heart of Oprah's brand as an advocate for equality. I've been the greatest champion of this film, Oprah insisted, her typical warmth giving way to defensive urgency. I'm not in charge of the budget because that's Warner Brothers. The excuse rang hollow coming from one of the most powerful women in entertainment history. If Oprah Winfrey, with her billions and unmatched influence, couldn't ensure fair treatment for Black artists on her own project, what hope did anyone else have? The controversy forced asked a question no one had dared ask before. Had Oprah's rise to unprecedented power and wealth disconnected her from the very communities she claimed to champion? Was she now more aligned with the gatekeepers than those fighting to break down the gates? Saying what you feel, being yourself, is what they call toxic. Ice Cube's conversation with Tucker Carlson veered into territory that would ignite a firestorm. As he spoke about gender identity and traditional masculinity, he stepped directly onto one of society's most contentious battlegrounds. "If I say I'm trans, people say that's great, you were born that way, we affirm you," Cube observed, his words gathering momentum. "But if you say I'm just a dude with male instincts, you're not affirmed, you're attacked." The pigeon analogy came next. Words that would be weaponized against him, twisted, simplified. "If I wake up and say I feel like a pigeon, I want everybody to treat me like a pigeon." These weren't the careful, focus grouped statements of a man controlled by Hollywood's machine. This was raw, unfiltered Ice Cube, the same uncompromising voice that shook America with "fuck the police" decades earlier. His independence from the club meant freedom to speak without a corporate filter. It also meant facing the fury of those who believed his words harmed vulnerable communities. The price of refusing to join the club was now on full display, both the freedom and the fury it brought. "You are the generation that is forced to depend on body cams to obtain justice." Oprah's voice resonated across the graduation ceremony, her words painting her as the moral conscience of a nation. "You witnessed the storming of the Capitol and the death of civility. You're acutely aware that voting rights are being gutted, women's rights are being dismantled." The words were perfectly crafted, the delivery flawless. This was Oprah as America had come to see her, the champion of justice, the voice for the voiceless, the billionaire who hadn't forgotten her roots. But as Ice Cube and others began to speak out, a question emerged. Was this carefully constructed image aligned with reality? Did Oprah use her unprecedented power to uplift diverse voices, or to control which voices were deemed acceptable? The contrast became impossible to ignore. Oprah on stage discussing happiness. Envy is the great destroyer, the happiness killer. Oprah behind the scenes, according to multiple Black artists, selectively amplifying certain voices while silencing others. When she advised surrounding yourself with people who stimulate, inspire, and lift you up, the words took on new meaning in light of Ice Cube's exclusion. The most powerful Black woman in entertainment history was being questioned by those who wondered if her gatekeeping had held back as many voices as it had elevated. "I didn't have anything against Oprah," 50 Cent declared, before revealing the infamous story of naming his dog after her. Every time she made a mention to hip-hop culture, it was something that was wrong with it. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Ice Cube, 50 Cent, now accusations that Oprah's Dr. Me Too coverage disproportionately targeted Black men like Russell Simmons and Michael Jackson, while treating accused white men with greater nuance. The images told a disturbing story. Oprah embracing Harvey Weinstein at industry events, then later positioning herself at the forefront of the movement against him once the winds changed. The contrast with her treatment of accused Black men raised uncomfortable questions about selective outrage and racial double standards. "When I actually got a chance to talk to her," 50 Cent recalled, "she was like, I never thought about it like that." The admission was telling, one of America's most influential cultural voices acknowledging she'd never considered how her coverage might disproportionately impact Black men. Had the Queen of Empathy developed blind spots that reflected and reinforced society's existing biases? And if Oprah Winfrey could fall into these patterns, what hope did regular media have of avoiding them? Why have all of the girls went missing that was at that school graduating class and nobody is talking about it? The question cuts through the noise about Oprah's Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. What began as her crowning philanthropic achievement, a $40 million school to empower young African girls, became shadowed by disturbing allegations. Court records from 2007 documented charges against a school employee for misconduct involving students between 13 and 15 years old. Parents claimed their daughters were subjected to systematic and ritualistic abuse within the walls of an institution bearing Oprah's name. Oprah went on record saying she was going to look at the situation, but questions lingered about whether her enormous influence affected the investigation's independence. The employee was cleared after Oprah's personal intervention, a resolution that left victims' advocates questioning whether justice had truly been served. For a woman who built her empire giving voice to the abused and marginalized, the accusations struck at the core of her identity. Had her tremendous power become a shield against accountability? Had the institution she created to empower vulnerable girls failed to protect them? These weren't just tabloid rumors. They were documented incidents that raised profound questions about power, responsibility, and what happens when even the most well-intentioned become too powerful to be held accountable. I would say, Oprah Winfrey, you know what you need to do, and stop hiding behind what you call negative comments. Monique's voice trembled with years of suppressed rage as she finally spoke her truth on Shannon Sharpe's podcast. The Oscar-winning actress had been blackballed in Hollywood, and she named Oprah as one of the architects of her industry exile. The betrayal went beyond professional sabotage. It cut into the most intimate wounds of Monique's life. Oprah Winfrey called us up and said my brother wanted to come on the show and talk about him molesting me. Monique recounted, the pain still fresh years later. Oprah had promised, if you don't want me to have your brother on the show, I will cancel the show. Trusting Oprah's word, Monique had opened up about deeply personal family trauma. Then came the crushing betrayal. Commercials featuring not just her brother, but her estranged parents with whom she'd shared painful history during confidential conversations with Oprah. She never said my mother was coming on that show, Monique said, her voice breaking. I would have said shut it down. I don't need the world seeing how greedy my mother is. The story revealed a new dimension of gatekeeping, the power to not just control careers, but to weaponize personal pain for ratings. It showed how quickly no could transform someone from Hollywood darling to industry pariah. I got labeled as difficult because I said one word and that was no. In Monique's story, the full machinery of exclusion was laid bare, not just professional blacklisting, but the exploitation of personal trauma by someone she had trusted as a confidant. When something this major happens, when you have the fallout, 50 women coming forward, that it's a watershed moment. Oprah's words about accountability for powerful men accused of abuse took on a haunting new dimension as the testimonies against her own practices mounted. Ice Cube, 50 Cent, Monique, Taraji P. Henson. Different stories, different grievances, but a common thread, the gap between Oprah's public image and private actions. America now faced a reckoning with one of its most beloved cultural icons. Had the woman who taught millions to speak their truth been selectively silencing certain truths that didn't fit her preferred narrative? Ice Cube's final assessment cut through the noise. Their brand of politics, I guess. But if you can't think for yourself, then you're not really free, are you? No, you're not. His words transcended personal grievance to touch something fundamental about American culture. The invisible constraints on acceptable discourse. The unseen hands that shape which stories reach our ears and which remain buried. Controversy wasn't just about Oprah Winfrey or Ice Cube. It was about the machinery of cultural power in America, who controls it, who benefits from it, and who gets silenced by it. As viewers, we're left with the most troubling question of all. In a media landscape controlled by powerful gatekeepers, how can we be certain we're hearing the full truth? And who else has been silenced while we weren't paying attention?